From Jacob to Israel, Chapter 2, Book 2, Chapter 2, The Ram's Horn Sounds. I slept for hours and hours. Dreams abounded, though the act of waking drove them from my memory. When I opened my eyes, I saw a thick, foggy black head staring down at me. The form straightened up. It was standing right on top of my nightstand, or rather, right through it, like it wasn't even there. This startled me, but I chastised myself for feeding into my delusions. I'm above this now. I'm sane again, I thought. Surely these were just mental projections. The shrinks ensiled cleverly within my ego a weapon of mass detachment. Denial on a grand level. These things aren't even real. I got out of bed, supporting myself with the nightstand. My hand went right through the shadowy entity, around where I thought its hip ought to be. The figure recoiled from my mortal touch and faded away. I put on some clothes, another pair of Joseph's pants, and one of my t-shirts from 5 years ago. The shirt strained over my chest, and for the first time, I realized how much bigger I had gotten. I caught my face in the mirror above my future baby brother's changing table. My beard must have been about 5 inches long. I stroked it lovingly and grabbed my cane. I could smell the succulent fragrance of food being served up. Breakfast. I hobbled into the kitchen like an elderly man, one small step at a time. My father's face lit up. "Welcome back to the world of the living, buddy. Come join us for lunch," my father said to me as he motioned for me to sit at the table. I must have slept for longer than I realized. Andrea was too busy stuffing her face with cube steak to say anything to me. She smiled, however, and waved quickly between frenzied fork thrusts. An open carton of ice cream sat beside her plate, spoon sticking out the top, poised for the next bite. I sat down to a plate that was already sat out for me. This made me feel at home for the first time in ages. I put my cane in the chair beside me and stared at the food in front of me. "Eat," Andrea commanded through the narrow passage in her loaded mouth. Food flew out in a spray of spittle as she spoke. She wasn't the same prissy music snob she once was. She had quite a bit of meat on her bones these days. My father didn't seem to mind. In fact, I had never seen him so upbeat, so honestly happy. For some reason, I couldn't bring myself to eat the food that sat in front of me. I ingested the smells instead. I'm not too hungry. I think I'm just going to find a book to read or something. I pushed my chair back, stood up, and grabbed my cane. My father wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Speaking of reading, did you write anything last night on that notepad I picked up for you?" "Oh, yeah, I did," I said matter-of-factly. I planted my cane on the ground in front of me and leaned against it. My bad leg began to tingle. "Well?" My father persisted. He pushed his plate back and put his elbows on the table. "Well, what?" I asked. "What was it about?" "Norse mythology," I replied coldly, disinterested in talking about it. I had forgotten how weary the act of conversation made me. "How do you know anything about Norse mythology?" Andrea asked me between bites. "Beowulf is senior material." "I don't know anything about it," I said, but apparently some part of me did. "Well, how did you write a story about something you know nothing about?" "It just came to me," I said without lying in the least. My father and Andrea shared a concerned look. "Can we read it later?" my father asked. The shadow men returned. 2 of them loitered by the sink. I paid them no attention. I was sane again, I thought. "You can read it right now." I tried to take the conversation out of the room and away from my delusions. We went to my bedroom together after supper. Andrea sunk into a soft armchair, one given to her for breastfeeding sessions, with her glasses balanced on the tip of her nose. She read the story with my father hovering over her shoulder. They were impressed at how I had fallen right back into writing. "There are a lot of facts about Norse mythology in here, Jacob. I don't see how you could have possibly fabricated this story without studying beforehand," my father said to me with a questioning squint in his eyes. "The vessel has heard the howl of 7 horns, seen the light of creation, and hung upside down from the world tree for 9 hours to receive his wisdom. The container was granted sight of the 9 worlds, the white buffalo, the golden calf of the awakening Christ consciousness." I told you, it just came to me. A lot of stuff does now. You know, like sometimes in dreams you can see the future or tap into some hidden knowledge. You know, like deja vu. That's the only thing I can compare to it. I just zone out and the information comes to me. I shrugged and leaned on my cane. My leg was bothering me. Andrea's glasses were about to fall off her nose, and her mouth dropped open. "That's amazing. And your writing is as articulate as ever." "It really is," they commented in unison. There was a long, uncomfortable silence as they stared at me like I was a freak. "I guess. So do you guys have any books to read around here?" I changed the topic yet again. My social instincts were beginning to come back to me. "I haven't seen any, and I know that the 2 of you are always avid readers." "No books for us right now. Just baby books and the Bible," my father said as he pointed to the Bible on the end table next to Andrea's chair. "Our library is in storage until we finish the renovations. We are building a whole load of shelves for them. We can go to the bookstore, though, to pick you something to read." "I'm pretty much a regular there," Andrea added. "Yeah, it has been a while since we brought you anything other than medication and notepads. You deserve a little spoiling. Besides, you have a birthday soon, and a few we need to make up for." My father kicked at the carpet and hung his head, then went off to get his keys. I grabbed the Bible off the changing table. Andrea went to the kitchen and scooped up a big bowl of ice cream. She headed out to the front porch to see us off and enjoy her dessert in the cool twilight. I followed her outside. "You aren't coming along, Andrea? I could use your help picking out a good book." No, baby. I'm going to give you boys some alone time. You have some catching up to do. Just tell Cliff that you're Andrea's boy and he will give you his employee discount. Have fun." She struggled down into her wooden rocking chair. I held my breath until I was sure that the frame would hold her weight. She looked like she was about to bust at the seams. She smiled and began devouring ice cream like there was a prize at the bottom of the bowl. Joseph came out the front door and kissed his wife and her sweet potbelly goodbye. I imagined my baby brother waving to us in the womb. I climbed up into the cab with a good deal of effort and folded my cane lengthwise across my lap. He started up the truck and I rolled down my window and shouted goodbye as we backed out of the driveway. "Ready to roll, buddy?" my father asked. It was nice to have a driveway that was paved, and not hundreds of yards long like it was at the back of the trailer. It's odd how we always underappreciate the little things. I sure am. I was wondering though, would it be okay if we went by Mom's house? The trailer? Yeah. I rolled up my window. That was torn down after your mother was locked up. My father didn't pussyfoot around the sensitive issue. I was glad for that. What about the property? I was worried my whole past was bulldozed to the ground, lost forever. Someone bought it from the bank after it foreclosed, and I think they built a house. But the church is still there. Martha Casey became the new pastor just a few weeks ago, actually, and moved back into the parsonage. My father stroked his mustache and scratched his cheek. Why did she ever move out? I asked quietly. Thinking about Martha had been hard since that night. She lost the only person she ever had, all because of me. He was serving the one who is crowned with a lotus blossom, his blood made holy, the sacred pact. She had to go to seminary, and the pastor that took over after Peter passed away, moved in. She just graduated, and the congregation overwhelmingly wanted her back in. So we still have a Pastor Casey behind the pulpit at Bethlehem Lutheran. Some older folks were upset that a woman should be the head of the church, but they were silenced by the overwhelming majority. I suppose her loss drove her into the palm of the grand architect. I wondered what a sermon of hers might sound like. This set my soul soaring, being able to connect something from my old life to my new. The 7 thunders sounded. Still, the last 7 days living in that trailer impacted everyone I ever knew. I laughed aloud when I thought about Mrs. Casey carrying her shotgun around the church, her thick calves bulging at the back of her long white robe. Can we pay her a visit? Sure, buddy, I'd bet she'd love that. My father turned on the radio and tuned into a conservative talk program. He began his political socialization effort. He explained the inner workings of the governing process to me. I expect this was some strategy at steering me toward his political ideals. Then again, I missed out on government in high school. Maybe this was an earnest attempt at education. I still thought that his lecturing stunk of propaganda. He was overwhelmingly conservative. He told me that big government was bad and that taxes should be cut. Unfortunately, the party that claimed small government and small taxes made government grow rapidly and spend billions of dollars of borrowed money from China. But this was before the Second War in Iraq. This was before 9/11 and the dawn of the Black Sun. The riding of the white horse with a giant bow, the dragon. Some people thought that a thing called Y2K would end the world in the year 2000, but instead it brought about the powerful, unstoppable rise of neoconservatism. A new face to corporate Nazism, much more dangerous than any computer bug. But all government is corrupt. Red or blue, all politicians' hearts are black. They seek to further their own agendas, not the constituents. I was earnestly interested in what he was talking about. It wasn't exactly fascinating, but I was beginning to understand the role of government in relation to its citizenry. And that alone made it a worthwhile pursuit. I simply hungered for all knowledge. My separation from the world these last few years put me behind on current events and various other issues. I had to catch up. I wasn't even a high school graduate. I had a lot to do and little time to do it in. Baby steps must be taken now, I thought. I'm still getting used to this world. We're getting awful close to Pastor Casey's, buddy. Time flies when you listen to someone yell at other people that are nice enough to call into their program. I smiled at Father slyly. That guy only said that taxes were necessary to provide infrastructure upkeep, and the host railed on him and called him a communist. I sense you will be a difficult convert. Young people are always liberals. Wait till you're my age. You may look wise with that beard, but when the government starts eating up your paycheck, you will think a bit differently. You should keep what you earn. The free market is the way of America. The whole concept of money seemed very unnecessary to me. It just separated people and bound them into this society. Animals don't need money. We lived like that once. It seemed sad that we couldn't live like that still. As we started down Highway 6, my hands started sweating nervously before I realized where we were. Subconscious thoughts started bubbling up, and fears I hadn't revisited for a long time exploded in my mind as I followed the hidden ley lines of my past life. As we traveled the well-worn path of my school bus, like I had done so many times before, my spirit drifted about 4 feet above our vehicle. Far away enough not to get consumed by my depression, close enough not to slip away for good. My body was shaking. Fear not, the giant is already dead. The eagle soars. I looked out the window. The shadow people were everywhere. They were milling around the road. They were slumping across the medians, lurching out of the forest that paralleled the road. We drew close to the valley that held, like a delicate emerald, the field of my dreams. I could feel it in my bones. My blood ran cold. As it came into view, the circles were still visible in the field. No grass grew there. The field was overrun with the dark, shuffling creatures. They didn't enter the interconnected circles. It was hallowed ground. The light in the darkness had hit the earth there, at that very point. It was there that the blood of a saint was spilled. It was there that I was saved by the word of God and his mighty angels. The church and parsonage looked the same. Time had changed little here, except the synapses in my brain. My delusions seemed intensified here, at this place. For the first time I saw another form, not a shadow, something different. I could see right through it, but when it moved, I could make out an iridescent outline. It was like a bent rainbow framing a very fast cartoon character. The creature looked shorter than a man, but I wasn't sure because it was so difficult to see. It zipped around inside the circles, making figure eights, like it was fending off these shadow beasts. I couldn't explain why, but as I focused on it, I got the overwhelming impression that it was some kind of elf. The knowledge flooded me. I didn't know what it meant. I wrote it off as part of being crazy. The circles are still there, I said. I had constantly referred to them in my drawings while I was in the loony bin. I ranted about them before I stopped talking. My father looked out the side window to see what I was talking about. Holy hell, that looks like a crop circle. What the heck? I've told you about that. I've drawn it. It was where the light came down and saved me from Mr. Riley. It was in the field the day before I died. I mean, the day before Thubton died. It just showed up out of nowhere. It was right where Mr. Riley fought Pastor Casey and killed him with his shovel. He broke my leg in the middle of the circle, and then, right before he was about to kill me, a light came down and I blacked out. I heard Mr. Riley drop his shovel. The light saved me. All of it just blurted out. I always wanted to tell this to somebody. I wanted to recall the terrors of my nightmare and begin to digest it healthily. I didn't cry. I spoke without emotion, just stating the facts of that dark night. My father slowed the truck down to 5 miles per hour in a 60 zone. That sounds a lot like something right out of a sci-fi movie, son. Are you yanking my chain? Did you salt that field? What do you mean? Aliens, son. Flying saucers. They are supposed to be the ones that make those crop circles dealies. I always told Andrea that's what your drawings look like. A bunch of crop circles. I had never thought about that, as silly as it sounds. I always thought that it was a magic circle that connected this world to another dimension, that allowed an angel to pass through and protect me. I had a long time to think about that night while I was locked up in that cell without a leg to walk on. I never spent much time thinking about aliens, but maybe they were one and the same. Aliens are angels. We pulled down the street that separated my old trailer from the parsonage. No trailer remained. A beautiful white house with a picket fence stood in its place. The driveway was finally paved over. This made me turn my lips in an honest smile. I hoped the house wouldn't be haunted. I lovingly thought of Thubton. I was glad the past was so pleasantly covered over. Joseph parked his pickup in the old Casey driveway. Being here felt eerie. We got out of the truck. I left the Bible on the front seat. I stood back while my father rapped at the front door of the parsonage. Mrs. Casey opened the door wearing her gardening clogs and a wide-brimmed hat. She was covered in dirt and clenching a gardening spade. Before my father had a chance to say anything, she saw me and dropped her shovel. My heart fell to the ground. Jacob? She looked right past Joseph and quaked as she stared me down. Then she bolted forward to hug me hard. She started crying furiously, holding me tight and covering me in mud accidentally. I haven't seen you since before I lost Peter. Though she looked almost exactly the same as she had years ago, my mind's eye saw her transformed. The shimmering outline of a little elf hovered by her side, as if it were her pet or bodyguard. And her aura was no longer the deep, needy blue that it had been. She now had a purpose, Christ, and a congregation of sheep that needed her. Her aura had become her husband's brilliant white. This made me nostalgic, infinitely relieved and happy. Good had not died in the world. God was still alive. Love cannot be extinguished so easily, certainly not by one angry demon, with a thirst for blood and liquor, and with nothing to lose. Peter isn't dead after all, I thought to myself. Well, hello, Mrs. Casey. I squeaked like a frightened mouse. I still felt completely responsible for her husband's early demise, and it showed on my face. "Oh, Jacob, it's so good to see you." She let out a tiny wail. I squeezed her hard to reassure her, to ease her, and to let her know that she wasn't alone in her tears. "I'm sorry." She wiped her eyes with her muddy sleeves. A smear of mud was left across her cheek like a medicine man's ceremonial face paint. "I didn't mean to cry so much, darling. I just haven't seen you in such a long, long time." "The last thing Peter and I talked about was you. He thought you would be a brilliant boy. He said he saw something in you. He said he..." The crying overtook her, and she lost her words. She held me like a rag doll in her enormous arms. I patted her back until the rapture of her flooding memories subsided, and the wheezing, brief gasps for air turned into normal, if not slightly heavy, breathing. "I'm so sorry, darling. He just thought of you like a son. He wanted to protect you, like his own child. So I guess part of me thought of you like my child, too. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there last night. That last night. None of this would have happened. Do you know how many times I've thought about that night over these last few years?" The crying came again. "That night has been in my mind every single second of every single day for just as long. It feels like lifetimes. I thought of Peter as my father, my protector, Martha, and I still do." Joseph looked at me as I spoke. He looked proud of me. This wasn't what I expected, but it eased me and steadied my resolve to confront my past head-on. Her large frame quaked against mine. I tried to hold her back, but it was futile. My knees were giving out. It was like a frail flood wall, trying to hold back the whole ocean. My cane wobbled under the pressure. "Listen to me, Martha. I know you didn't get to see him again after you left. I accept my responsibility for his absence. But he did protect me. He saved my life. He gave it for me. And his sacrifice must have pleased God because I survived. I don't know how. I should have been killed. But I was saved. It was a miracle, and I think your husband is a huge part of that miracle. He has certainly helped change my grasp on spirituality." I eyed the darting, rainbow-form elf at her side. I rubbed Martha's shoulder and pushed her off of me with a great deal of effort. I looked her straight in the eyes, gently flexing my strained cane arm. "And I'm back. I'm better, and I'm not going anywhere for a while. So you have a part-time son if you want one, and an apprentice." I paused. "I have missed out on a lot, and I have a feeling that you might have a lot you can teach me. What do you say?" Martha's glossy, bloodshot eyes squinted, and her wet face curled into a beautiful, wrinkly smile. "I'm glad you are home, Jacob. Come inside. We have a lot to catch you up on." She kissed my forehead. "You come along too, Joe. You folks don't have anywhere y'all have to be, do you?" My father spoke up for the first time. "We were just going shopping for some literature later tonight. The bookstore downtown stays open late. We're in no hurry." He smiled at me to let me know that I could take my time. That's enough of that. That was a lot of reading. See you guys next time. Bye.